What's going on, guys? Welcome to this crash course on king and pawn endings. So we're going to be looking at all of the fundamentals and the basics in endgames where there are kings and pawns only. This is very common when you're playing against an evenly matched opponent. You trade off lots of the pieces throughout the game and you end up in a position like this at the end of the game where there's maybe one or two or a couple of pawns for each side of the board. So we're going to be looking at several different examples. Let's jump right in. So in king and pawn endings, there's one question that needs to be answered. And the question is, who gets a queen first? Because most of the time, whoever gets the queen first will win the game. So in this example, is a very basic example, but there's a lot of things we can learn from this position. White has a pass pawn on the A file. He'd like to push it and get a queen here. And black has a pass pawn on the H file. He would like to push it and get a queen over here. And so the question is, who gets it first, right? So if we are white, we have to ask ourselves that, and this brings us to the first concept that's important to understand, and it's the idea of pawn races. You're going to see this a lot in king and pawn endings. If white starts pushing his pawn, it's basically a race between this pawn on A2 and this pawn on H5. And who's going to get the queen first? One way you could do it would be, I'm going to go here, he's going to go here, I'm going to go here, he's going to go here. That's the hard way. Okay, the easy way is to just count how many moves it's going to take. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves and I can get a queen. Well, how many is it going to take black? 1, 2, 3, 4 moves and black gets a queen. So obviously 4 is less than 5. So in this example, black's going to get the queen before we will. If you don't believe me or don't trust that the counting works, let's just check it out for ourselves and see what's going to happen. And sure enough, black gets the queen first, and he's not only is he putting us in check, but he's also controlling the queening square to where if we try to get a queen, he's just going to capture it. All right, so back at the starting position, the next question would be, after we play this move, A4, he plays here, do we just automatically lose the game? Is there anything else that we can do if we're white in this position? Well, instead of just continuing to push our pawn because we know we're going to lose, what if we change our strategy and we try to stop this guy from becoming a queen? Well, that brings us to the next important concept in king and pawn endings, which is pawn versus king races. Okay, so we just looked at races between pawns, right, where one pawn is racing another pawn. You also have situations where the king is trying to catch the pawn before it becomes a queen. Like in this example, our king would like to try to stop his pawn. And again, you could do it the hard way. So I'm going to move here, he's going to move here, I'm going to move here, he's going to move here, I'm going to move here, you know, to see if you can catch it, or you can do it the easy way. So I want to show you a little trick. It's white's move in this position. And so if you're wondering if you can catch a pawn, the way you can do it is wherever that pawn is at, draw a line on the diagonal, and then go up and back to where it is, and over and back to where it is, and make this box in your mind. Okay, just kind of visualize this box. And the question is, if your king can enter into that box, then you can stop the pawn. If your king cannot enter into the box, then you can't stop the pawn. So in this case, can our king enter into this box? Well, yeah, right? We could just go there, or even here. Both of those moves would enter into this box. And so sure enough, if we do it, we go here, he goes here, we go here, boom. We caught the pawn, and if he tries to get a queen, we just take it. All right, so I went back to the starting position again, and let's say that after we play A4, black realizes that, okay, if I try to move my pawn, white's going to be able to capture it. And so he says, you know what? I'm going to change my strategy. I'm going to come over here and try to capture white's pawn. Well, can he catch the pawn? What's the easy way to check? Well, we make the diagonal, create the box, right? So this is the box that we get. And can black's king enter into this box? Well, the answer is no, right? He's one square too short. So he's not going to be able to catch the pawn. And we can see that for ourselves. He goes there, we go here, he goes there, we go here. He's one move too late, right? And we get the queen, and we win the game. So that's a very helpful trick that you should remember is whenever you're trying to calculate if the king can catch the pawn, you just draw it out on the diagonal, create the box, and if the king can enter into the box, he can catch the pawn. If not, he can't catch it. And just to illustrate that concept of the box one more time, I've changed black's position of his king. And so now if we play A4, we get this box here. And check it out. This is where the box would be. Black can step into it. And so we know he's going to be able to catch our pawn. And sure enough, he gets there in time, he captures it and takes our queen. All right, so one last time going back to this position, the way that we win as white is we start to push our pawn, and then depending on what black does, we change our strategy. So if he tries to catch our pawn with his king, like moving here, well, we keep moving it forward, and we know he can't get into the box, right? We move here and the box is too small, we're gonna win. If he changes his strategy and starts pushing the pawn, well, we know that we can get our king into the box, so we move it over, right? And whenever he pushes the pawn, we move our king over, and if he ever moves his king over, we don't just go eat this up, because then we let him get into the box, right? So we have to keep moving it forward. And then if he does this, we come over here. If he does this, we come here, right? Because if we make the mistake of capturing the pawn, oops, sorry about that. If we make the mistake of capturing the pawn, guess what? We let his king into the box, and now it's just a draw, right? So we have to kind of alternate back and forth by pushing our pawn and capturing with the king over here. All right, next we're going to look at a very common position. So we're white, we have an extra pawn, we would like to push it and get a queen. The problem is black's king is sitting smack dab in front of our pawn. So what do? Well, we can't move it forward, obviously, the king blocks it. We can't move our king forward because black's king is what's in opposition. Okay, opposition is a special term you have to understand in king and pawn endings, and it basically means that one king is directly opposing the other king. And that's important because we cannot move our king forward because black's king is controlling all those squares, which means we have to either move to the side or back. Those are our only options. So if we move to the side, black can get a draw in this position every time by going straight back. And when we try to bring our king up, he just brings his king over, again achieving opposition. And so we either have to move our king back or to the side, or we can try to push our pawn forward, but what's going to happen is he's going to move his king over. We're going to move our king over, and this is a stalemate, right? His king's not in check, but he can't move anywhere. It's a stalemate. It's a tie game. Not what we wanted. We can't win. Now, that being said, if we back up a second, if black doesn't know what he's doing, he actually can lose this position by making the wrong move. So instead of going straight back, if he goes on the diagonal, that's a crucial mistake. And the reason is because he allows us to get opposition, right? We bring our king forward, gain the opposition, and now it's black who has to make a choice on which side does he want to go to. And even if he goes here to try to block the pawn, now we can push it forward, and the position is different. It's not a stalemate anymore. Black actually does have a place to go. He has to move there, and it allows us to bring our king up, control this square, and we can escort our pawn for the queen. Now, this is an important position as well because if you can ever get your king controlling the queening square, okay, so this is called the queening square because it's the square where the pawn has to go to become a queen. If you can ever get your king controlling it, that's really good because what can black do? He can't do anything. He can't move there because your king is controlling it. And once you next move, get your queen, he can't take it because it's defended by your king. So that is the goal. When you only have a lone pawn, you have to try to control the queening square. And if you're able to accomplish that, you're going to be able to win. All right, now that brings us to our next example where we're going to build off what we just learned. So same kind of situation where white has one extra pawn and he would like to get a queen. And again, black's king is kind of in the way, blockading him from doing that. But the difference now is that white's king is in front of his pawn, and before, in the other position, if you remember, white's king was behind the pawn. Okay, so here we're behind the pawn, and then back to this example, we're in front of the pawn. Okay, so that's an important difference. Now, this position actually, it's a win for white if it's black's move, and it's a draw if it's white's move. And the reason that's changes is because if it's white's move, it means that white has the opposition. That means black has to either step to the side or retreat backwards. And if he steps to the side, he allows white's king to gain control of the file, right? So that he can escort his pawn forward. And so let's say black goes here. Well, now we can push our pawn and black's in trouble. And if we go back, let's say instead of trying to come forward, he just tried to stay in front of the pawn, right? Blockading it that way. Well, again, we gain the opposition. And we continue to do this until we force him to the side again. and keep gaining control of those squares, right? And he can keep doing this, and we're going to keep getting the opposition. And eventually we get to this position, and guess what? He has to go to the side, and boom, he can't go back anymore. He can't block the pawn anymore because there's no more aboard, right? He has to come up, push our pawn. He can try to do this, but again, we just go here, and we're escorting the pawn all the way, right? He goes here, push the pawn, he goes here, and what's the move? This is important. We gain the opposition with our king. If you push the pawn forward, that is a huge mistake. And now we give it back to black, and this is the same position we looked at earlier, which is a draw. Okay, so you do not want to do that. Don't make the mistake of pushing the pawn forward. You have to keep the king in front and always gain opposition on his king when you can. And now again, we force him to the side. And remember, we control the queening square, and we just escort our pawn forward for the win. He goes here, we go here, he goes here, we go here, and we get the queen. And by the way, a queen and a king against a king is a win for white. If you don't know how to do that, I have another video. I'll link it in the description below that shows you the process. Go watch that to make sure you understand that. But this should always be a win for white once you're able to get the queen. All right, now we're going to learn a new concept called triangulation. And this is a fancy word that just means you're losing a tempo. Okay, and if that doesn't make sense, just hang in with me. After you see this example, it all makes sense. So very similar position that we just looked at. We've got this pawn. We'd like to become a queen. His king is blocking us. It should be a draw if that was all that was happening. But we've got some extra pawns over here, and that changes things. Now, if it was black's turn in this position, if you remember from the previous example, going back would be his best chance. And then when we bring our king up, he would come over. And if we tried to push this forward, we would end up getting a stalemate. But in this case, we wouldn't do that. We would just take this, and we would end up winning because now we have two pawns, completely different situation. We would be able to get at least one of these to become a queen and win. Okay, so if it was black's turn, let me go back, this pawn back here. If it was black's turn, he would have to move away somewhere because we have the opposition. We could come in and take the pawn. But what if it's our turn? What if it's white's turn right now? Well, we can't go there because his king is controlling the square. Well, let's just move over here and see what happens, right? What's he going to do? He's going to go back. And when we go over, he's going to go up. And if we try to push our king forward, he's going to gain the opposition. And if we go here, he's going to go over, and guess what? It's a stalemate. So how do we make progress if it's our turn? Well, this is where triangulation comes into the picture. And the way it works is like this. Instead of just moving our king back and forth, which doesn't accomplish anything, we move our king back, and then we hop back to these squares before we jump back up at the right moment. So this is what it looks like in practice. We move our king over, he's going to go straight back. And last time we saw we can't just go back to where we came from where we get the exact same position. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to just bring our king back. And the idea is that now black doesn't want to come here because boom, we would get the opposition and essentially accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. So he's going to have to move to the side. And now we wait again, we go over here. And the point is, by doing that, we essentially changed the tempo of the position. So now again, he doesn't want to go there, or boom, we get opposition. So he's got to go back. And now we can bring our king back to here, and it's the same exact position, except it's black's turn. And the reason that's good for us is because now if he comes up, boom, we get the opposition. If he doesn't come up and he goes over here, guess what? Boom, we still get the opposition. And now, boom, 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 it's not a stalemate. We come up here and we get a queen. So if that's a little confusing, let me go back and recap it one more time. We had this position, it was our turn, okay? We moved here, he moved here. I want you to pay close attention. Look at where the pieces are. It was our turn now, right? These pawns are here. King is on the white square, pawn's on the white square, he's on the white square, and it's our turn. But after the triangulation maneuver, where we went back, he went here, we went here, he went here, we went here. King's on the white square, pawn's on the white square, he's on the white square. Everything's the same except whose turn is it? Now it's black's turn. So all that maneuvering lost a move and gets us into a winning position. So that's triangulation. If that didn't make sense, go back and watch it one or two more times, and it'll probably click. Try it out for yourself. But very important concept, comes in handy in situations like this where you need to kind of lose a move. All right, so we've covered a lot of the fundamentals. Now I want to just show you a couple of example positions that look a little bit more like what you would find in a normal chess game. So here's a position that at first glance looks relatively equal. Both players have 2 pawns on each side, but it's white's move, and white has to make a decision. And the decision is, does he go for these pawns, or does he go here and try to stop, black's king? And the way that you want to approach these positions is very similar back. Remember when we talked about pawn races and how you just counted the moves? It was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves, and 1, 2, 3, 4 moves, whatever it was. Same exact concept applies here. So, but the way you would do it is, if I go here, clearly I'm going to be able to capture the pawns before his king can catch them. So what is he going to do? Well, he's going to come over here and start taking my pawns. So the way you do it is you count. 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to start pushing this forward. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 moves, and I should have a queen. And now let's count for him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 moves. Okay, so I'm ahead. I'm going to get my queen first. And if you don't believe me, let's see if that's true. So I go here, he goes here, captures, goes here, captures, goes here, I push, captures, I push, he pushes, I push, he pushes, I push, he pushes, boom. We get the queen first. He's not there yet, and we win the game because we have a chance to, we could just use our queen, like come over here, stop this, game over. Okay, so same concept as with the pawn races, even in slightly more complex situations. You just want to count the moves to figure out, are you going to win or not? All right, now here's another position, and it's almost identical to the previous position. We got 2 pawns on this side, we got 2 pawns on this side. The only thing that's different is that I have advanced these pawns forward and the king a couple of spaces, right? So before it was back here, now it's up here. And if we do the same exercise, you'll notice it's very different. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 moves. And let's check for black. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. So if we do the same thing, we're going to lose. So in this case, that should be a clue that, okay, this is not the right move to play in this position. I have to go back here and try to prevent his king from coming in. It's my only chance, right? Because we counted and we know for sure that's just a guaranteed loss. So again, counting is very, very important, right? Figuring out who's going to win the pawn race, or in this case, it's like a king capture and then a pawn race, but who's going to win, right? And all you have to do is count. That's the easy way to do it. If you try to calculate every move, it's going to be very difficult. All right, so the final example I want to leave you with, and this is very, very useful, very practical, and you can use this in a lot of your games, is it almost looks pretty even. So 5 pawns for black, 5 pawns for white. But the big difference and the big advantage that white has is he can play a4, and after black trades, white can use this pawn as a decoy. And this is very important in king and pawn endings. If you can ever get a passed pawn to use as a decoy to keep your opponent's king occupied, then it frees up your king to go and take all the other pawns, right? If there's like a clump of pawns on one side of the board, and you can get one passed pawn on the other side of the board, like in this case, that usually means you're going to win. Right, because black can't come over here and like defend these pawns, or you're just gonna go get a queen. He's gotta either keep his king here to babysit this pawn, or try to go capture it. And as soon as he does, guess what? Boom! You're going over here. You're taking all these, and you're gonna win. And so in this example, black doesn't really have any good moves. Like let's say he goes here, you just bring your king over and take these. He's gonna go there. He's gonna capture it. You're gonna go here, and he's too late, right? You're just going to take probably this one, come over here, take this one, and guess what? Boom, game over. Okay, so very useful using a pass pawn as a decoy. Keep that in mind. That's going to be how you win a lot of king and pawn endings. We looked at a lot of sort of more complicated examples, but at the end of the day, if you can just make a decoy, run your king over to the other side of the board, take all the pawns, and get a queen, that's the easy way to win. Okay, so I hope that helped you guys. Let me know if you have questions. Put them in the comments. I'll try to answer those. But As always, thanks so much for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.